Is that good?
Yeah, that's perfect. So you've got 8 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Okay. So I want to thank Taco and JL for this debate and hosting it. And so the topic today is, does the Christian God exist? And of course, I affirm yes. I think the Christian God is the one necessary explanation for all things. And so my case is simple. There's 3 undeniable facts. A personal creator who raised Jesus from the dead, lines up to with 3 main points. Contingency. Everything that begins, changes, or depends could have not existed. The universe is contingent. Contingent things don't explain themselves. They demand a cause outside the system. Simple, unchanging, and necessary. And personal. Only a mind can account for order, life, and rational agents. Only a necessary mind grounds the laws of logic and math, which exist whether matter does or not. Naturalism says it just is. That's not an explanation. That's just a shrug. So that's my point 1. My second point relies on history. And there's 4 facts accepted by nearly all scholars, both skeptic and theist, which is 1, Jesus Christ was crucified and buried. His tomb was found empty. He appeared alive to followers and skeptics. His disciples, once terrified, proclaimed his resurrection in Jerusalem, and they died for it. Now, JL can say, well, maybe it was theft of the body. Maybe it was just a hallucination. Maybe it was just a whole bunch of crazies, right? But all of those excuses all collapse under scrutiny. The best explanation is that Jesus rose from the dead. Only a being with power over death could do it. Only the necessary creator fits. The resurrection isn't a myth. It's history's strongest evidence that God acts. Okay? And then my third point would be morality. We don't just prefer that torturing children is wrong. We know it is wrong because it is objective. Morality is an objective duty that's real, right? Naturalism reduces ought to chemistry, but we live as if duty binds us. Only a personal lawgiver grounds objective good. The same God who raises the dead and commands the conscience. So that's my third point. So, and I think JL will try to call this circular, and it's not, but I do want to remind people here that every core foundation of worldview circles. Okay? Every foundation circles. It's just that my worldview explains logic, life, death, and duty, and naturalism explains none of it. And with that, I will give all my time to the opponent.
Sorry about that. I appreciate you hanging on there. So let me know when you're ready, and we'll start your 8-minute timer for your introduction.
I am ready.
You got 8 minutes.
All right. Thank you, Taco, for setting up the debate, and thanks to the witness for taking the time to take the positive position. The topic of the debate tonight, does the Christian God exist? Now, before we dive too far, we need to first acknowledge that there are 3 logically possible ways to answer this question: yes, no, and indeterminate. And which of those answers it will be is entirely determined by how the God itself is defined. For example, if the God in question was defined as merely being an agent that creates, does not interact with anything it created in any way, and is fundamentally inaccessible by its creation, then the answer would be indeterminate. While it would be logically possible for that entity to exist, the agents within the creation would have no means nor mechanism to determine the truth or falsity of that proposition, and so they could not know if it did or did not exist. But we are talking about a very specific God tonight, namely the Christian God in this debate, so indeterminate won't come into play. The problem here is that the God in question could be articulated as being either concrete or abstract in nature, meaning that the God either stands in causal relation to everything that is not itself, or it merely stands as a conceptualization invented to represent the various abstract concepts that we humans utilize to quantify the reality that we perceive in accordance with whatever ontological or metaphysical assumptions we happen to be making. Now, for this debate, I'm going to assume that my opponent holds the position that the God exists as a concrete thing, independent of human minds. So starting with that, we first have to determine how the God itself is defined. And this is where things get a little bit sticky. And that's because of the 6 different families of Christianity and the following near 50,000 denominations of Protestantism, is there a way to determine which of them has the 100% correct way of defining the God? And the answer to that is, of course, no. But we can go to the primary source material for how they define it, and that is the Bible, which in the Christian worldview is held as being the singular means by which their God interfaces with humanity. Of all those different variations of Christianity, it can be determined that the vast majority of Christians hold that their God possesses 2 specific attributes. 1, that it is omniscient, and 2, that it is perfect. And that will work because those 2 are really all we need to answer the question of this debate: does the Christian God exist? So working as an internal critique, we can take the first claim. God is omniscient, meaning that it knows all true propositions and it knows them infallibly. To debunk that, we need only go to Genesis 18, 20-21 concerning Sodom and Gomorrah. In this verse, God expressly states, "I will go down and see if what they have done is as bad as the outcry that has reached me. If not, I will know." The obvious problem here is that if God were in fact omniscient, then it would already know what was happening in the 2 cities and so would need to visit the cities to see for itself. But even worse is the last part of that verse in which God establishes a precondition for its own knowledge, being that upon arriving at the cities, if things are not as bad as the outcry, then it will know. This statement is directly contradictory to the attribute of omniscience, and if the God is defined as such, it logically follows that God cannot exist, as logical contradictions themselves cannot exist. Taking the second claim, God is perfect, understood from verses Deuteronomy 32:4, Psalm 18:30, and Matthew 5:48, just to name a few of them. And we need only understand the logical contradiction entailed by a fundamentally perfect being creating something that is fundamentally imperfect. Were an entity perfect in all ways, as is described within the Bible of this entity, then anything it created would also be necessarily perfect, as the entity itself creates perfectly. Creating imperfectly being something that the entity could not do, as that would be a logical contradiction. And as part of perfection is that the thing in question, and as a part of perfection, the thing in question could not be reduced in quality, as the state of perfection logically entails that no exploitable weaknesses exist for it to reduce its quality. If such a thing is capable of being reduced in quality, as is entailed by the logical possibility of sin existing within the not God set, per Romans 5:12, when nothing dictates to the God that it must necessarily exist, then that God cannot be perfect, and as such, cannot exist as if defined as such. There, of course, are other logical contradictions that follow other attributes, such as the God being all-loving, all-powerful, ineffable, wanting a relationship with humans, or being 3 in 1. But those are only necessary to address if the prior 2 mainstream accepted attributes are not agreed upon, which I hold are sufficiently contradictory and demonstrate that the Christian God, as it is defined by mainstream Christianity itself, does not exist because it cannot exist, which would explain why faith is so fundamental to the religion as opposed to actual knowledge. And any post hoc or ad hoc rationalizations that my opponent may rely upon to try and skirt these contradictions, such as appeals to mystery or appeals to consequence, can be addressed in the open discussion, as well as any specific arguments, such as the transcendental, the ontological, the cosmological, or the moral, which are not actually evidence themselves, but just assertions predicated on unjustified ontological and metaphysical assumptions. Ultimately, if the God in question is defined as Christianity defines it, then it does not exist because it cannot exist, and the answer to this question is no. However, if my opponent chooses to define his God in some esoteric or proprietary way to avoid the numerous contradictions, then they won't actually be arguing for the Christian God. But we'll have to wait and see where this conversation winds up. So thank you again to Taco, and thank you to Witness, and of course to the live chat for being here.
Yep, and thank you for the introductions, both of y'all. My internet is all better now. I figured out what was going on. Anyways, are y'all both ready?
Sure.
Perfect. I'm going to hide myself.
I have an irrational number of socks on.
Gotcha. All right. You guys have an hour plus whatever y'all get from super chats. Mega bloodbath engage.
So I am curious, because I pretty much just start these things off with one question. Given that you started in your intro that you seem to know that your God exists, like you know it as in its knowledge and not just a belief claim. Are you able to demonstrate that your God exists as a concrete thing, independent of human minds, without begging the question?
Yes, just from the reality in which we live, like the 3 points I mentioned, and something you left out in your opening. Then I do want to tie into this, which is the contingency.
Okay, that literally requires the assumption that the universe is contingent. There's no evidence that it indicates that it is, and all of the models and all of the novel testable predictive models that we work with indicate that it is not. So it's an unfounded assumption.
So you don't believe in the contingency of like the laws of logic or anything like that?
Well, they're not contingent in the way that you're thinking. That like I hold to regulatory theory in the sense that these things are abstractions that are basically developed to describe and quantify the reality that we perceive, but they are not held like transcendentally. No, because the transcendental argument is predicated upon unnecessary ontological assumptions about the nature of these concepts. So like knowledge, truth, justice, logic, mathematics, whatever. And so the reason they work so well is because they're languages. They're literally developed as languages. They're just logical languages, which is why they work as well as they do. But their applicability or their efficacy doesn't state anything as to their ontological nature, which is that they are abstracts that are used to describe everything. I don't make unnecessary metaphysical assumptions or ontological assumptions about their nature because they can't be justified. Unless, of course, you define the entity into existence as doing the thing you needs to do, which is what is begging the question. So it depends upon the metaphysical and ontological assumptions you're making. So when I say, can you do it without begging the question, that, when you make those ontological assumptions that you're not justified in making, you're in essence begging the question.
So just to wrap this up, so I'm understanding you, because what I just heard from you sounds like pantheism, and you're not a pantheist, are you?
No, it's not pantheism at all. Pantheism is that God and the universe are one and the same. So,
okay,
but I prescribe no agency.
You said that the universe is not contingent, which means that it could not fail to exist.
I hold it as a brute fact per Agrippa's trilemma. I hold to that the universe itself is brutally contingent. So it's like it has always existed. It will always. It has always existed. It will always exist, and so it merely changes states. The key kicker on this is that we know that something exists. And we know that something coming from what would ostensibly be the philosophical void would be a logical contradiction. So there has to be something beyond the point of our observability. So we know that the universe, no model tells us the universe had a beginning. There is an origin point of observability that we call the Big Bang, but that's when we can begin to measure the universe. But there was obviously something before that. That's just a logical inference. The question is, what is that thing? Now, we can hypothesize of this conversation we're having two things. It's either the universe itself or it's something else that's not the universe. You're hypothesizing that it's something else that's not the universe. I'm simply holding to it is the universe, simply in a different state that we don't have access to and we can't quantify currently, because that's all we're justified in doing, because we can't demonstrate access to anything else other than the universe itself. So simply asserting that it's something other than the universe, that it had to do that, makes the unnecessary ontological assumptions to the nature of the universe itself, that it is contingent when nothing indicates that it is, and then it's begging the question of the God by defining it into existence to do the thing that you think needs to be done. So
would you agree that observation is what tells us that the universe is contingent? You did say that you believe in
observations don't do that
of the universe.
No, observations don't do that. The observations as they pertain to the scientific models we use in cosmology and astrophysics and quantum mechanics do not indicate that the universe itself as a system is contingent. I mean, the first law of thermodynamics, the law of conservation of energy, it's pretty much energy can either be created or destroyed. Matter itself is merely energy transposed. The energy itself is the capacity to work to be done. So long as there's work that can be done, I mean, that's pretty much it. You're talking about the differentiation is literally just existence in and of itself. And, the philosophical void, which I don't hold as a thing that ever existed. So I hold that the universe itself, because we have access to it, and to assume anything other than the universe has always existed would be begging the question.
Okay, so just like
I said, and real fast, nobody fired a question for witness. I'd love to hear, or I guess a request. I'd love to hear a description of a universe without logic when there is a break.
Yeah, I think that would be for JL, right? To answer. It
would simply be unquantifiable. That's all it was. Just like we say states prior to
no, he said witness. He was asking.
Yeah, I know he wanted for witness, but the answer that I would have, it would be a state of the universe that is unquantifiable by human terms, because we humans are limited by our biological grounding. It's how we're grounded and how we view the universe. We have a singular frame of reference.
Let's have witness answer the question now.
Okay. Well, I mean, describe a universe without logic. That's the question.
Yeah,
I think that would be a
basically, the
universe without a
be
God.
It'd be unquantifiable. No, it's
Right,
not.
right. I don't think it could exist.
No, it would be unquantifiable by human terms. In logic, the way we understand logic, it would just be unquantifiable. That's all it would be.
Yeah,
It would still
I can agree with
exist.
that.
Yeah, it would just be
But I do believe. So again, do you believe that the universe could not exist?
Well, okay, so the universe in and of itself, I hold that no, I hold that the universe itself has always existed. That it simply changes states. What those states might be, we don't have enough information to actually make a declaration about that. So if you're talking about could it ever be, could the philosophical void ever exist? I don't hold that it could. Simply because there is something. So by virtue of that, it's kind of like going all the way back to Descartes. I think, therefore I am. So it's kind of like I have my capacity to doubt entails, or my capacity to doubt is how I logically conclude that there is something there that is able to doubt what is being thought. So because there is something, then we can logically infer pretty strongly that there has always been something. So I hold that the philosophical void is not a thing that can exist. So ipso facto, the universe has always existed and will always exist until something other than the universe can be demonstrated to exist.
Okay, so what I'm hearing though now, because with the consensus of the science, it does. I mean, science does point to, with our observations, a beginning.
No, an origin point of observability, not a beginning of the universe. An origin point of observability that we call the Big Bang, which is the inflation moment. It's literally the moment that we can begin measuring the universe. But beyond that, the best analogy I've ever gotten for this was one from one of my physics professors. The analogy is kind of like if you imagine, like if you go to the earliest point in the universe, to the Planck epoch, or to the Planck time, right? At that point, you face a brick wall. It's a brick wall that goes up infinitely, down infinitely, into the sides infinitely. All right. Now, just because you can't see what's on the other side of the brick wall doesn't mean that there's nothing on the other side of it.
Okay. So if the universe...
No, hang on a sec. And the question then is, how can we determine what's on the other side? Well, the only thing that we have access to is what's on this side of observability. So we hypothesize about what's on the other side,
right,
using what we know on this side. And so nothing indicates that the system in and of itself is contingent because of the nature of energy. So there's always been something, and likely that thing was all the evidence points to the universe itself.
And that's circular, right?
No, that would be a brute fact. Just because there's three horns to Agrippa's trilemma. That you mentioned one, circularity. The other one is brute fact. The other one is infinite regress. I don't hold to infinite regress. Regress isn't really a problem because you can have bounded infinite sets. But I hold to just a brute fact because I don't think it goes much further than that, and that's where the evidence is indicating.
All right. So just to recap, just to simplify everything for the audience. So right now, I think we're standing in our debate right now in time currently. You're standing on that the universe exists because the universe has always existed. And then my counterpoint is the universe exists because God created it.
Right. Mine's ontologically parsimonious, and that's where the evidence leads. It's the most Socratic. It's the ontologically parsimonious, and it's not begging the question. And it's not begging the question.
Okay. So I have a question. If the universe always existed, why isn't it in heat death right now?
Well, in this current stage, we're heading towards that. Like I said, it changes states. Remember I said that previously, that it just exists in different states. There may have been a heat death prior to the emergence of our state when matter becomes possible again. Because after heat death takes place, matter can't be formed anymore. And so eventually you get to a point where matter can no longer form because the particles are too spread out. And then eventually, like the remaining black holes that are left in the universe will then eventually, gravitate everything towards them, will swallow them up, and then they'll all swallow each other up until the final black hole evaporates into Hawking radiation. And then there's literally quantum effects and gravity is all it is. This comes from Lawrence Krauss's book, A Universe from Nothing, when he talks about what the state of the universe would look like with no matter in it, when you literally just have like quantum effects and gravity, and how from that state you can get quantum effects like quantum vibrations like that can result in inflation events, which is likely. Now it's hypothetical, yes, but it is based on the math. So it's a very, very strong hypothesis, mathematically backed hypothesis.
Okay,
But
so you
obviously we
disagree.
can't demonstrate it. So
Okay, so you disagree with the BVG theorem that says that any universe that has been expanding on average, like ours, cannot be past eternal. It must have had a beginning.
okay, so if you're talking about the inflation event, because the inflation event would be preceded by a prior energy state, which would not be equivalent to the state that it's currently in. So this state is finite. The state has a beginning. The state has like an emergence point from a prior state, and it will have an end state where the inflation event reaches thermal equilibrium, and then that will give rise to the next state.
Okay, so Alexander, Alexander, he's part of the scientist who wrote the BVG theorem in 2003. He's a cosmologist. I'm sorry, Alexander Vilenkin. He says all the evidence we have says the universe had a beginning.
That's flatly incorrect.
And so your eternal universe is scientifically impossible. Are you aware of that?
No, that's incorrect. That's flatly incorrect. None of the evidence leads towards that.
Do you believe in a multiverse?
I don't believe there's enough data. I mean, it is a hypothesis that's out there. I personally don't hold to it. I don't think there's enough data to conclude either way. I can see mathematically how it could happen if certain things are true, but we haven't experimentally demonstrated them to be the case. So anybody who sits on it would be sitting on it for personal reasons, for like emotional reasons. But the evidence does indicate one way or the other. Currently, it's one of those unfalsifiable things. But ultimately, I want to point out that just pointing to the fact that there are states of the universe that we don't have access to, and so everything we talk about when we make statements about them is hypothetical, is not justification for claiming a God exists. Because if you're stating that we don't have access to it, so therefore it must be something. If you're asserting that thing is God, then there's no justification in doing that, because it still would just be a God of the gaps. Even if the naturalistic worldview, which is like you stated in your intro, even if it does wind up with question marks, it's more intellectually honest and ontologically parsimonious to say we don't know. Potentially, we don't know, we may never know, or we just don't know yet. It's more intellectually honest, more intellectually rigorous, and more ontologically parsimonious to state that than to assert a God for which there is no evidence for that, because you have to make those unfounded ontological and metaphysical assumptions first about the things you're pointing to that we have access to in order to justify the God. And that's assuming that you're defining the God correctly, but you have to define it in a way to warrant the assumptions you're making about those ontological metaphysical features. So,
my argument though is on facts-based, evidence-based, science-based reason that the Christian God must exist. He is the best answer for.
It's not an answer; it's an assertion, because you can't. No, an answer would be an explanatory model to explain how the God does the thing. If the God is the causal feature and the universe is the effect, you need to be able to describe how the God did it. Simply asserting that it did is not an explanation, and it's not an answer.
Well, would you agree that we're both on the same footing here? You're just saying the universe always existed eternally. I'm saying no, it didn't.
No, mine's evident. No, mine's evidence. Mine's evidence backed, and I'm not making the question.
I just shown how
I'm evidence backed.
Actually goes against the science.
It doesn't. It doesn't.
Scientific evidence.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't. But mine's still ontologically parsimonious, and I'm not begging the question.
You could say that doesn't make it true, but
you are begging the question. You're assuming the truth of your conclusion and your premises. That's why you're begging the question. You're assuming the truth of your conclusion within your premises. In order for the universe to be that and to have the features it has, like the moral argument you made, the transcendental and the cosmological, that requires metaphysical. That requires certain. It's not an explanation. It's an assertion, because you can't explain. An explanatory model describes the mechanistic relationship between the cause and the effect. Okay, well, that's an explanatory model. You don't have an explanatory model. You simply say God did it.
But you didn't explain anything either. You just made.
No. I explained up to a point. There's a point where we can only hypothesize. But just because there is a feature that we can't explain, that does not justify asserting a God. Because you have to first beg the question. Because you first have to beg the question.
You're lost to physics.
I know.
You said that brute fact, which is lost to reason, and you claimed an internal universe, which is lost to science.
It's not internal. No, it's not. None of those three statements you just made make any sense whatsoever. Okay, I explained how the evidence indicates it. It is not a hard conclusion. Okay, but it is the one that the evidence points to, and it's ontologically parsimonious, and I'm not begging the question.
Well,
So there's the problem. When I say for the answer to be yes, that you know it exists, unless you want to change your position to you don't actually know, you simply believe it exists, because that would be much more.
Well, we'll get there we'll get there later on in the debate when we move on.
Real fast, nobody on fire said, "Witness, you want to appeal to science and the consensus within the last 22 years instead, or just cherry pick?" Thank you so much for the super chat.
I'm not cherry picking anything. Okay, so if that's the case, because we're talking about more plausibility at this point,
yeah,
and I would say that you would then have to explain the Roman Guard, which are elite, and there's a death penalty for failure in Acts 12:19, right? And then there's a sealed stone, a 2-ton rock with a Roman seal on it, which is treasonous to break it. And then also, too, the Jewish leaders begged Pilate for the guard, right? In Matthew 27:64. And then the disciples were hiding, and most of them even denied Jesus. So,
because they didn't want to be executed. They didn't want to be executed because
right,
they like no. So what's the most plausible? You just asked me a question. What's the most plausible? That they were all hiding because they broke the law by absconding with his body.
I think the most plausible is that Jesus was risen from the dead.
No, that requires an appeal to magic. It makes it less plausible. No, that requires an appeal to magic and mystery and begging the question of the existence of the God. So therefore, no, that's not the most plausible, because already you're begging the question of the existence of the God to do what you think it does in order for Jesus to be divine or to be supernatural in nature, and you're multiplying your entities unnecessarily. Okay, you don't have parsimony on your side, and it's an appeal to magic.
Okay, so somehow disciples that were hiding and even denied Jesus publicly,
we're not wanting to be
they went past the Roman Guard. They removed a 2-ton rock, and then they stole the body of Jesus, of whom they didn't even believe in at that time.
Or they paid him off. There's a number of ways it could have been done. They could have bribed him.
Okay, I mean, you can let the
no. I can come up with any logic. It's logically possible. It is within the realm of logical possibility.
Just like
then the question then is, what is most likely? Then because what is most plausible? What is most likely? Which answer requires me to make the fewest amount of assumptions, which is why I have ontological parsimony here.
Well, see, it's not assumption. We're also going with
you assume the God exists. You assume the God exists.
With the witnesses who witnessed Jesus after
his death. No. Okay, so here's another problem. 1 Corinthians is where you're citing from Paul here. Paul didn't actually tell you who the 500 witnesses were. There are no names. There are no dates. There are no individual accounts. There is no independent record. There's just Paul's claim. So you don't have 500 verifiable witness accounts confirmable witness accounts about one person. You have one guy's unverifiable claim about 500 unidentified people. Okay. So you got Paul. That's it. You got Paul making claims.
Well, Paul didn't need to tell us who these witnesses were. He said most of whom are still alive. And now that's AD. That is 55 AD. That's 25 years after the event.
Okay, that's what it says in the book. Paul may say that, but Paul could have been making it up.
And then Paul says, go ask them. No one did.
Yeah, he the burden of proof on them. But knowing full well that them as believers, they'd likely just take it on faith.
Well, it seems like that your theory has 500 problems.
No, it doesn't. It's simply looking at the plain reading of the text. Paul made one claim about 500 unidentifiable people. One unverifiable claim about 500. It would be great if there was even one independent witness account, but there wasn't. You'd think that would be really important, that one person who saw this would have reported this, but we don't have any of that surviving in history.
From the other side, right? You would think that, because a lot of people hated Christians at that time.
Not at that time, no. That was beforehand. That was
the Sanhedrin.
No, like a lot of people, like if you're talking about Rome, but the Sanhedrin were just a group of individuals. Yeah, they didn't like it because Christians were heretical. Christians were heretical because Christians were heretical. It was heretical. It was heretical. That's why they hated them. Okay, but Rome didn't hate them at that time. So,
here's what I just want to paint this picture for the audience, right? So Paul didn't name them because he didn't have to, because they were alive, checkable, and unrefuted.
That's not unrefuted. That's a claim. You can't back it up.
Okay, well, show me a refutation to it.
I just gave you one. A plain reading of the text. Paul makes one claim, one unverifiable claim about 500 unidentifiable people. For all we know, and it is within the realm of logical possibility that Paul just made that up.
Okay.
That's not like logically impossible. So, which one? So the question is, which answer is more ontologically parsimonious and doesn't require any commission of logical fallacies? And that's the most plausible one. Well, it's a claim that he made that we can't verify about 500 people who we can't identify. And then instead of supplying that evidence to anybody else, he just said, either trust me, bro, or you can go find out by doing your own research, in a time and place when trying to find people who were unnamed. Okay, not to mention Christians at that time being members of the same cult. If someone came to you and said, "Oh, did you see Jesus? I saw Jesus," or they could claim that they saw Jesus, and then someone else would be like, "Well, he's a Christian. He wouldn't lie to me. He certainly saw Jesus." You see how this works? The evidence wasn't supplied because the evidence is not necessary in a case of faith. If this was knowledge that they were after, then evidence would be necessary. But remember, this is all faith.
Apostles and these 500 people. Let's just say this 500 don't even exist. Okay, I don't even need that. So you're saying the apostles, they stole a body, they hid it forever, they preached it.
They hid it forever. They just buried it in the desert.
And then they died for it. That sounds really plausible.
Okay, all of the martyr accounts. Okay, so only a handful of the martyr accounts can actually be confirmed. Not all of them were martyred for this.
Wouldn't that be a miracle without God?
No, it wouldn't. It would be people dying for what they believe, which happens all the time. That's not amazing.
But you're inciting that they really didn't believe it. They just stole his body.
Or they were, or it's even possible that the story is wrong and they weren't martyred.
Why? Okay, name one person, one historical example of liars willingly dying for a known lie.
Most recent, Jonestown.
This lie that you suppose where the apostles didn't really believe it and then they died for it somehow changed and transformed millions of people. How
people make the same claim about Islam. Does that make Islam true?
Well, Islam copied off of something that works.
People say the same thing about Buddhism. People say the same thing about Jainism. People say the same thing about Shinto, about the Tao. People envelop. People find a group of beliefs that speaks to them.
Islam was true.
People find a group of beliefs that happen to resonate with them, that they happen to like, and it appeals to them emotionally, and they will alter their behavior if they truly believe that. Okay, but just because they've been, I'm not done. But just because they've been convinced that it's true doesn't mean that it's true. So just because a whole bunch of people believe a thing doesn't necessarily follow that what they believe is the case.
Okay, so
it just means
the transformation
that they've been convinced it. Well, okay, so I mean, you're talking about the road to Damascus experience.
Yeah, I'm talking about the whole thing, the road to Damascus.
Right, I know what the book says. The book says that God appeared to him on the road. We can't exactly demonstrate that. That's a claim. Okay, I can offer a more plausible explanation.
But you just said that he was. So you don't think he believed he was believing a lie? Then you think he believed?
I think there's no way to determine whether that story there's no way to determine whether Paul was high and hallucinating, or he was sick and hallucinating, or God actually appeared before him. I mean, that's a claim in a book. Okay. Now, if you're talking about transformation of that, you're basically claiming that God appeared in the exact same way as the road to Damascus to millions of people on the planet, but that hasn't happened.
Well, no, I wouldn't say that. Paul replaced
Saul.
Judas. So,
Saul, road to Damascus experience. Saul,
Judas as an apostle to Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ chose him directly to be an apostle, which is a unique role, right?
Doesn't matter. Hi, I'm a cult member. I'm a megalomaniacal cult member. You can have. I like you a lot.
What transforms people today is the truth.
No. What transforms people in the sense that you're talking about, like basically makes them alter their behavior so that they fall in line with the thing, is being convinced something is true, not necessarily the truth itself. When you are convinced the thing is true, okay, so here's the problem. Beliefs are what you're convinced of. Knowledge is things that are true that have been demonstrated to be the case. Okay, you may believe a God exists, but you can't demonstrate it to be the case. Which is why I asked you at the very beginning of this, the question that you still haven't answered. Can you demonstrate that it exists independently of mind and context as a concrete thing without begging the question? And everything you've done since then is beg the question. That's why I asked that question, because the answer is no, you can't. Okay, so then you need to be able to determine, do you believe this thing? Are you still going to claim that you know it? Or are you simply going to realize that you believe it, you're convinced of it, but you can't demonstrate it to be the case?
Can you define what it seems like you keep talking about faith? You keep hinting at faith. Can you define faith?
Faith is belief without rational justification.
Okay. Is that how Christians define faith?
No, Christian. Well, technically, yes. They just do it they just word it differently. But if you want to go back to like the etymology of I broke this down in one of the videos that I did on my channel about how the difference between gnosis and pistis and the specific words that are utilized in the Greek within the Bible to reflect that it is basically they are propositions that you hope to be true, that you want to be true, but you cannot demonstrate them to actually be the case because that knowledge has not been revealed. And that makes it like that's the difference from gnosis, which is at the time, etymologically speaking, gnosis was information that was known to be true and could be demonstrated to be the case because it had been revealed by the gods, which is the etymology of that word going back to the Indo-Proto-European language. So looking at the two differences, the Greeks had two different words, gnosis and pistis. And pistis was the word that was utilized when we're talking about things that we want to be true or we hope to be true or desire to be true, okay? Or we really, really think are true, but we can't show them to be true because that information has not been revealed by the gods. So
I define faith as trust grounded in evidence. So I trust that my car brakes, right? Because that's
not faith. That's confidence. That's confidence. So now it's a false equivalent. That's a false equivalent
because of the empty tomb, 500 witnesses, and transformed lives.
That's a false equivalence. I've already said it. There weren't 500 witnesses you can rely on. There's one claim about 500 people. There's one claim about 500 people. You don't have. You can't say you have 500 witnesses and not. You can't say there's 500 witnesses and not be able to name one of them.
Paul.
He wasn't one of the 500.
So he's a witness.
He's the guy making the claim. How do you know he's telling the truth?
How about Thomas?
How do you know that? How do you know that Paul was telling the truth about any of them?
How do we know Caesar crossed the Rubicon?
Because of the preponderance of the evidence and independent sources.
Because of one source we have from 150
It's not one source. We have multiple sources. Okay. Would you like me to pull them up? Would you like me to pull them up? No. Would you like me to pull them up? Would you like me to pull up all the sources on Caesar crossing the Rubicon? I can do it right now.
I
didn't think so.
That's just obfuscating.
So I know. I mean, I could pull up the multiple independent sources that we have that confirm that event took place. Okay, it's not just one source; it's many sources. It's just like the many independent sources we have for the actions of Alexander. Okay, of many historical figures. But no, you have one source for like God and everything like that, and that's the Bible.
Okay.
And then if you want to take things after the fact, those came centuries after the fact and were individuals repeating the things that were passed along to them. They may have believed it. They may have not believed it, but they were recording. They were repeating the story.
It seems like you are resting on nothing but denials. My faith rests on
It's not denials. Fact. I'm breaking it down. I want to know the most.
Who's the fidest here?
I want to know the truth. And you can't multiply your entities unnecessarily and get yourself to the truth. Mine is ontologically parsimonious. Yours is not. I am not begging the question. You are. I am not appealing to magic. I'm not appealing to consequences.
Like you're making up your own definitions.
I'm not making up my own definitions. I'm utilizing the standard like SEP definitions for these things.
Okay. Well, Hebrews 11:1 says faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen.
That's the English translation. I went to the Greek.
So it's not blind and it's evidential.
No, that's the English translation. I went to the Greek to understand what was being articulated. That's the breakdown easier English translation, which is not actually that accurate to what was being said in the Greek. In the Greek, it was expressed as things that are felt to be the case, though they cannot be known to be the case. Okay, there were three specific words in there. It was pistis, what the hell is that? I probably need to pull up my script. But there were three specific words within that, which indicate the context in which the information is being relayed. And the context is emotions, feeling it that way. You feel it to be the case. You want it to be the case. You hope it to be the case. But you do not know if it is in fact the case. That would be different because if it were, then they would use the word gnosis there instead of pistis.
Like me trusting on my car brakes.
That's confidence based upon prior information. You have prior information and the history of that. You know how long those work. You know how long those work. You know how long you've had them on the car, and you know that, and you know they're indicators when your brakes are going out. When they start squeaking. If your brakes aren't squeaking, there's no reason to think that they would go out on you unless somebody cut your brake lines.
All right, so
and real fast, nobody, or Professor Hizzle says nobody is arguing that Caesar resurrected, though. Jesus needs a lot more evidence than writings. Thank you so much.
Well, the point in bringing up the Caesar thing is that we have very little evidence for that happened 150 years after the fact, but we accept that as being historically accurate. Okay, but when it comes to Jesus, only like 25 years after the fact.
You got Plutarch, you got Suetonius, you got Appian,
you got a lot more evidence for Jesus.
No, you don't. You don't.
Than Caesar crossing.
You don't. You have one claim. That's it. Okay. You have one claim, and the Gospels were written decades to almost a century after the fact. We have 4
Gospels, and we have Paul, and so
you have 4 Gospels that have conflicting accounts of the event. Conflicting accounts of the event, none of which were eyewitnesses to it, and they weren't written by eyewitnesses. There are 4 different accounts of what happened at the tomb.
Okay, well, we can.
And nowhere in the Gospels do they describe the resurrection, but like the actual event. So no, I'm sorry. Like they're not accounts. Number one, they weren't written at the same time. They weren't written by eyewitnesses, and they were anonymous.
Okay, so
you're not reliable. No, they're not reliable. They were anonymous texts. They were written decades to a century after the fact.
Okay, yeah,
Okay. And they have conflicting accounts.
For you. They
don't. No, it's not a I'm giving you the evidence that indicates. I'm giving you the evidence that reduces. I'm giving you the evidence that reduces the probability that you are correct.
Well, you making up problems doesn't make it true.
I'm not making up problems. We can actually quote the Gospels. The accounts are different in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. I know the Bible rather well.
Say they were different before. You said that
I did. 4 conflicting accounts. That's what I just said.
What does conflicting mean?
Means that they are not identical. They're not the same.
Okay. Do they?
They conflict with one another. In fact, at points they're contradictory.
Hold on. If you go to a fireworks show on one side of town, I go
not analogous. Not analogous. This is not analogous. This is a historical claim, not a contemporary claim. No, it's not analogous because it's not. No, it's not analogous because it's not analogous because we are talking historical claims, not contemporary claims.
I have the Gospels accounts of the same event.
I have the Gospels.
I'm showing you that 2. Like for instance, if we both witness the same thing, but we both have different accounts of it, right? That doesn't mean that your account's false or that my account's false. It just means that we both saw the same event and we focused on different things and we wrote it down. That's how it is in Scripture. There's nothing wrong with that. That's natural.
Okay,
that's what we
incorrect. It's disanalogous again, and I'll explain it again. You're talking a contemporary event that we can both demonstrate that we were present for. You cannot do that for this historical claim. This is a historical claim, not a contemporary claim. That's why it's a category error. It's not analogous. I already tried to explain that to you.
The logic is analogous.
So no, it's not. It's a category error. No, it's a.
So,
do you know what? Okay. Do you know what? I'm going to ask you. Do you know what a category? Do you know what a category error is? Do you know what a category error is?
Yes.
Tell me what a category error is.
In the category in which it does not belong.
Okay. Historical claims are not equivalent to contemporary claims.
Right. That's not
category error. You're trying to analogize a contemporary. You're trying to analogize a contemporary claim to a historical claim.
No, I'm showing that the logic of two.
It's not because the foundational parameters are different. In the contemporary claim, you and I are both present at the event. In the historical claim, you're making that assumption. And not to mention, it doesn't account for the contradictions in the narrative. How can two people have contradictory statements when they're literally at one point? We're not talking about a fireworks show.
Contradictory. There's no contradiction.
There is. I just pulled them up. Would you like me to read them?
Well, first I want you to define a contradiction. What's the contradiction?
Where only one of them could be true.
So A equals not A. That's a contradiction.
Yes, A equals not, or let's say A equals A is not equal to not A. So yeah, if you violate that, a logical contradiction. Only one of them can be the case.
Tell me that A equals not A.
So contradictions in the gospel include like Jesus' genealogies, the details of his birth and early life, and the accounts of the resurrection, number of women at the tomb, who was seen first, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so just to go into specifically, we're talking about the actual resurrection account. The number and names of the women who went to the tomb differ across gospels. Matthew describes the stone being rolled away before the women arrived, while Mark, Luke, and John say it was rolled away as the two were watching it, or that it had already been moved. The number of angels and who saw them first is also described differently.
Okay, none of which is a contradiction.
That is, because if the number's different, they can't both be true.
Okay, so
if one person says there was 2 and one person says there was 4, that's a contradiction.
Okay, so if I witnessed an event and I focused on and I saw 2 major fireworks,
it's irrelevant. Okay? It's still contradictory. The Bible is contradictory, which actually goes towards my perfection thing. My perfection point out.
Can hear this. So
it actually goes to my perfection claim in my intro. No, I'm kind of done. It's like go to the moral thing so I can wreck you on that now. Okay, unless I'll just pull the Euthyphro dilemma. I'll just pull the no. I'm tired of you interrogating me.
I have one more question.
So the Euthyphro dilemma pretty much breaks down your moral argument.
Hold on, I have one more question for you since you dodged the last one.
I didn't dodge the last one. I explained how you were wrong.
Remember, we're talking about faith. Well, you misapplied. You know what is?
No, I went to the source. I went to the Greek. Thank you, Justin from Deconversion Zone, for teaching me the Greek.
Are you fluent with Greek?
I'm not fluent in it, but Justin is.
Okay, cool. So
Justin is, and Justin teaches. So I'm not fluent because I've only started listening to Justin this year.
I quoted from the King James and those translators.
I quoted from the Septuagint.
And so here's this. And so
I'm quoting from the Septuagint. I'm quoting from the Septuagint, not a book that was changed so that a king could divorce his wife. I'm quoting from the source. I'm quoting from the source material.
Okay, so I have a question for you because remember we're talking about faith and belief, and that's really what we're on. And so I have a question for you. So
not knowledge.
Is your faith that the universe always existed?
I have no faith.
Is that based on evidence?
I have no faith.
Or your faith that physics is wrong?
I have no faith. It's confidence. Not the same. Mine is evidence based. Yours is emotion. Yours is emotions based.
You are defining biblical faith as
it's emotions based. No, it's not. It's emotions based. You're making a false equivalence here.
Well, it sounds like you're really emotionally tied to the universe always existing.
No, that's gaslighting. It's where the evidence points.
No, well, actually, the evidence points to the opposite.
No, it doesn't. You're misquoting that. That's scientifically illiterate. No, it's scientifically illiterate. I went to Lawrence Krauss. Okay, I went to the most updated models.
But why are you rejecting the BVG theorem?
Because it's old and nobody adheres to it.
How come there's no refutations for it?
It doesn't need to be a refutation. It's literally a hypothesis. I'm rejecting the hypothesis because the evidence
is the best one we have.
No, it's not. The best evidence we have is the universe has always existed. That's what the evidence indicates.
Okay, and is that based on your faith?
Most recent models. That's not faith-based. That's evidence-based. That's confidence.
That's against physics too.
No, it's not against physics. It doesn't violate physics in any way, nor does it violate quantum mechanics.
Does an effect need a cause?
Does an effect need a cause? Per what we observe in like what we call causality.
Does that need a cause?
Yeah, that would literally be quantum fluctuations that occur, likely within the scalar field. But that is always the state. When we talk about like quantum fields themselves always exist. So we're literally just talking quantum fluctuations that go on. You know. which is why there is some argumentation for like the universe being cyclical. I don't necessarily hold to that. I don't think there's enough data, but there's some people that do, that the universe just repeats.
Okay. Well, we can move on to morals if you want. I think.
Sure. Can you refute the Euthyphro dilemma?
We've both.
Can you refute the Euthyphro dilemma?
Explain that to me.
The Euthyphro dilemma was posited as ancient Greece, and it's the question. The question is originally articulated was: is a thing pious because God? Is a thing pious because God does it, or does God do it because it's pious? And it translates today: is a thing good because God does it, or does God do it because it is good? And this is what we call an exhaustive true dichotomy. So I pose that question to you: is a thing good because God does it, or does God do it because it is good?
So is the thing good because God does it?
Or does God do it because it is good? It's one or the other. It's what we call an exhaustive true dichotomy.
Well, I would say good is good because God is good.
That's an uninformative tautology that doesn't address the problem at hand.
And then nobody on fire says boo-hoo.
It's a false dilemma.
It's not a false dilemma. It's an exhaustive
good because good equals.
There is a super chat. Nobody on fire says boo-hoo. Jail refuses to accept a single 23-year-old study. 1 wah, 2 boo-hoo. See, I'm witness.
Right. So it's a false dilemma because good is God's nature.
That's an uninformative tautology. All you're saying is God equals good equals God equals God. It's an uninformative tautology that doesn't address it. Why ought God call a thing good?
Well, just like in Genesis, God created all things and said it is good.
Okay. Okay. In reference to what exactly?
To his nature.
Okay. How do we know his nature is good?
Because he reveals himself to us in Christ.
No. How do we? No. At the beginning, how do we know its nature is good? Good in reference to what exactly?
To himself.
So it's an uninformative tautology.
No, it's very informative because
no, it's
God.
not. No, do you know what a tautology is? Fucking hell.
Yes. And so God throughout time is a personal God who reveals himself.
That's irrelevant. That doesn't say why God ought to be good or how you quantify or how good is coherent when there is nothing that is not good to reference for coherency.
Well, you have nothing to reference for what is good other than your own subjective thoughts.
I have no problem with that.
Okay, so you can't.
And there's no logical issue with that either.
And you can't actually say that. Hey, me saying God.
I don't claim that things
wrong.
I don't claim that things are objectively good. I am a moral. I'm a moral anti-realist.
Okay, so you cannot claim that me saying God is good is wrong.
No, I can say it's subjective to you. You could say that you subjectively hold it to be good, but you can't state it as not as a objective fact, as a mind-independent fact. It's just the way you view it.
We have 40 additional minutes right now, so there's still 20 minutes available in the overtime pool. So if y'all have more questions, feel free to get those out. I'm starting the additional 3 minutes right now. We do have a couple questions.
Okay. Do we have closings too, or what?
No, y'all have plenty of time still. This is not even. Yeah, you'll have closings, but this is okay. We still got time. Cutlery Duck says the witness evidence of some dude claimed 500 people saw a thing is about as strong as look at the trees. The witness. What is good evidence?
It's more strong than Julius Caesar.
It's not. I pulled up all the sources on Julius Caesar. I didn't get a chance to
audience
list
can
them
look
all.
it up themselves too.
And then
it's really simple. No, it's really simple. You've got Plutarch, you've got Suetonius, you've got Appian, you've got Lucan, you've got
the same source.
They're not. You got Life of Caesar, the 12 Caesars, the Civil Wars, Pharsalia. You've got Caesar's own works. You've got the contemporary writings of Cicero, historical works of Sallust.
Maybe in the future we can have a debate just on that topic.
I literally just pulled them up. They're right there. Like literally. Plutarch in Life of Caesar, Suetonius in the 12 Caesars, Appian in the Civil Wars, Lucan in Pharsalia, others are the contemporary writings of the letters of Cicero, historical works of Sallust. Okay, and Caesar's own and Caesar's own works. So
again, we would have to have a debate with that. Just you.
We don't. I just debunked you. We don't. I just debunked you. We don't. I just debunked you.
You did not. You're making assertions. That's not debunking.
I'm not asserting. I quoted the sources.
You didn't prove it.
Plutarch, Suetonius, Appian, Lucan.
Go to Plutarch and quote where it says Julius Caesar crossed the Rubicon. Go ahead.
Provided an account in his Life of Caesar, which focused on anecdotes and illustrations of Caesar's character. Life of Caesar. I have to pull up the book. And then the 12 Caesars written by Suetonius. And then Appian wrote in the Civil Wars. That specifically when that covered when Caesar stopped to contemplate the consequences of his actions before he actually crossed the river. Lucan, who included an account in his epic poem Pharsalia, which, like Suetonius, depicted Caesar's decision. Other sources of contemporary writing, such as letters of Cicero and the historical works of Sallust.
How many eyewitnesses? How many eyewitnessed Caesar crossing the Rubicon? Out of Plutarch, Suetonius, Appian, and Cassius Dio, how many of them eyewitnessed it?
The number of people involved. Caesar led the entire Legio 13, the 13th Legion, which consisted of around 5,000 legionnaires and 300 cavalry towards the river. Well, some sources suggest Caesar himself may have crossed later after his troops had already gone ahead. Many people, including soldiers and his entourage, would have been present during the general crossing. Primary sources and eyewitness accounts, stories we know it comes from later historians, notably Suetonius and Plutarch, who lived these blah blah blah. These counts likely drew sources that are likely lost, including direct testimony from individuals like Gaius Asinius Pollio, Pollio, a contemporary officer and later historian who was present during the campaign and wrote a history of the Civil War.
When were all they?
In short, a whole legion of soldiers were present for the overall military action, and at least one key eyewitness, Asinius Pollio, is known to have recorded an account that informed later historians.
No, we have no evidence for.
That we do. Asinius Pollio was there, physically there, on the ground, boots on the ground.
That's the claim. That's the claim. How many years after the event?
No, that's his work.
No, that's the claim. How many years after that, dude? Because we have four sources only: Plutarch, Suetonius, Appian, and Cassius Dio, and they're all
Lucan,
around 100 to 200.
And Lucan, and Cicero, and Sallust.
They're all 150 to 270 years after the event. So the point is, so if four sources 150 to 250 years later prove Caesar crossed the Rubicon, why do 5 sources within 30 years plus 500 living witnesses fail for Jesus?
There weren't 500 living witnesses. We can throw that claim out. And the claim about Caesar doesn't require an appeal to magic. It's more ontologically parsimonious.
Okay, so you're
which I already explained before. So
it's all based on, ooh, you think it's magical, so therefore
it is magical. It is It's a violation of reality. The resurrection is a violation of natural law. That violates natural law.
Like an eternal existing universe?
That's not a violation of natural law. That's actually consistent with the laws that we currently observe. What the fuck? You just I tell you, I inform you of things. You just go one in. I know you have a set narrative, and I know you have this problem with being debunked on it. Okay. I know that scientific illiteracy, man, you got to get caught up.
Could it be that God, who created all things, can pause natural law or suspend it to do a miracle?
That would be unfalsifiable. There'd be no justification to believe that was the case. That'd be like last Thursdayism. Okay, God created everything last Thursday. He just created with the appearance of age. It's completely unfalsifiable. It'd be completely irrational to accept that as being the case, even though it is within the realm of logical possibility, but no.
Okay, well, the Big Bang Theory violates conservation of energy.
It doesn't.
So is the Big Bang magic too?
It doesn't, and I'll explain how it doesn't. I have the work on that as well.
But it seems like that you allow one suspension of a law, but just not.
No,
God's.
The Big Bang does not violate the first law of thermodynamics, which states that energy can neither be created nor destroyed. The Big Bang is seen as a process where energy was converted and spread out, not created from nothing.
All right, and the next question is from Karen Dave. Does the witness know? All right, that was all the questions. You guys keep going. You guys still have time.
Okay.
Well,
So
I mean, he already. I mean, he couldn't answer the first question that I asked. That I started the whole thing off with. He never answered that. He's still begging the question, and he has no rational justification, and he already conceded to moral relativism. So, I don't really have anything else.
I mean, what we've seen is this, though. Like, he's denying science. He doesn't believe what consensus
I'm not. I've already explained it.
That the universe, he says the universe didn't have a beginning, even though all the observable evidence we have today points to it having a beginning.
Nope,
and then also he claims, oh, well, you know, it's more plausible that Jesus's followers who were weak, who didn't even believe him when he died on that cross.
Not what I said at all. It's a mischaracterization of what I said.
Roman elite soldiers moved a 2-ton rock and stole the body and hid it forever, and then died died claiming Jesus was resurrected. Okay,
that's not what I said at all.
Like, and then, you know, he's begging the question all the time. He's picking and choosing what types of evidence he wants to accept, because he'll accept Caesar crossing the Rubicon with that amount of evidence we have, which is lesser than. Okay,
so can you demonstrate that your God exists independent of minds as a cause, as a concrete thing, standing in causal relation to other things, without begging the question, yes or no?
Yes, I've been.
Okay, do it without interrupt you if you beg the question.
Okay, the contingency of the reality in which
begging the question,
the resurrection of
begging
Jesus
the question
Christ,
begging the question,
and objective morality,
begging the question. Resurrection to be true, Jesus must be divine. In order for Jesus to be divine, God must exist. I asked you, how do you know that God exists? You pointed to the thing that would only be true if the God exists, which assumes the God exists for the thing to be true. That's okay. Begging the question. You did that in all three things.
I'm not begging the question. I didn't assume God.
Oh, what the living? Irrelevant. You can't just appeal, well, that's just icky to me. That's not an argument, nor is it a defeater.
Okay. Is naturalism true?
As far as we can tell, is where the evidence goes, yes.
Okay, so you're the one begging the question.
No,
How come when I follow the facts and it leads me to the Christian God, it's me begging the question? But when
because you're making, because I explained how
it leads to naturalism. That's
I explained how. I explained how. If you had listened in my intro, I did. I explained it in my intro. In reality, like for example, the term knowledge, or the term truth, or justice, or beauty, or whatever, what are called like the Transcendentals. You make unfounded, unjustified ontological assumptions, or assumptions about the ontological nature of these things. I hold them to be abstract concepts that we subjectively apply to things in reality to quantify them. Okay? They're just abstract concepts. They don't represent anything objectively real. All right? Now, you say differently. You say that these are real things that are undergirded by the existence of the God that dictates what they are, which means that there is an objective, like mind-independent stance for what beauty is. But there's no evidence that indicates that. In order to make that assumption about the ontological nature of the term, you need to assume that the God exists and is defined a particular way to justify the assumption you're making, which means you are begging the question. You're begging the question of the existence of the thing to do the thing you think it's doing. I asked you, demonstrate it exists without begging the question. If you point at the universe, you're begging the question. If you point at what you think is the resurrection, you're begging the question. If you point at the Bible in any way, you're begging the question. If you point at morality, you're begging the question. Actually, technically, no, you're just wrong, because moral anti-realism is true at all. That is true.
So you're saying if I look at real world evidence, when I look at the world around me and observe it, and I look at historical evidence,
because you're special pleading, because you don't hold that. No, because you're special pleading, because you don't hold that same thing for the Bhagavad Gita or the Vedas.
If I just follow the evidence and it led me to the Christian God being true, that's begging the question. But when you follow the same evidence and it leads you to naturalism, that's not begging the question.
No, it's not. I explained how it's not.
No, you didn't actually.
Then I will explain it again. I'll rather naturalism. I will explain it again. Okay, we only have access. I'm explaining it again. It's not hypocrisy. We only have access to nature. We can only demonstrate access to nature. There is the noumenological and the phenomenological. Okay? Phenomenological takes place in your head. We don't have access to what's going on in your head. But we have access to nature. Naturalistic explanations are ontologically parsimonious, meaning that they require no additional assumptions that are unnecessary, and they're backed by evidence and novel testable predictions. To assume that there is something other than that, okay, you're assuming that. You can't demonstrate that any particular metaphysical assumption you're making is the case, which is why metaphysics doesn't really do anything.
Actually, I have demonstrated that.
You can't demonstrate a metaphysical assumption. Metaphysics are abstracts. You can't demonstrate them to be the case.
Like logic, math, and morality, right?
Those aren't metaphysics. Oh, what the living. Those are abstract. Those are abstract. They're abstract. They're languages. They're languages that we utilize to quantify the reality that we perceive.
Right, and they're immaterial, right?
They're descriptive, not prescriptive. Prescriptive is necessitarianism, which is begging the question at its core, because it assumes the existence of the God is defined a certain way to do the thing you think it does.
So, yeah,
whereas regulatory theory acknowledges that these things are descriptive and beholden to our frame of reference.
Yeah, but you're saying they just exist.
What do you mean that? No, they exist because we invented them. They're languages.
So,
they're languages.
2 plus 2 doesn't equal 4 if no minds are around.
Exactly, yeah. Because there's no mind to articulate that.
So
they're technically just objects in space. They're just objects in space. It's an abstract language. It's a language. Math is a language. Logic is a language. They're languages of quantum.
How is that not Platonism?
Because Platonism asserts that these things exist objectively in the Platonic realm, which I don't hold to. Okay. I don't hold to that.
So my view is that abstracts exist in the necessary mind of God. Right?
That is an unnecessary, unjustified assumption based upon the existence of a God that you're begging the question of. Well, demonstrate that the God exists. No. Demonstrate that God exists first.
No mind and no reason.
Demonstrate that God exists. No, you have to demonstrate that God exists and that it is defined in the way you think it is defined, and you have to show the mechanistic relationship between it and the thing you're pointing at. Then it becomes an explanation. Until then, you're just begging the question in your assertion. Come on, man. This is basic philosophy.
If abstracts like justice exist necessarily, where were they before?
I don't hold that they do.
Okay.
It's an abstract concept. It's an abstract concept that we invent to apply to things in reality, to apply to them subjectively, because what one person's justice is not another person's justice. Okay. One man's trash is another man's treasure.
But you can't really explain the abstracts, which I can.
No, I can. An abstract is a mental conceptualization. We think them up. They're mental concepts. The number one is an abstract concept.
Is that your subjective thought, or is that true?
They're mind dependent, yes.
Because you already said that your subjective thoughts can't be proven right or wrong.
No. Oh.
Well, real fast.
That's not how you work. That's not how you work with languages.
Valid question.
Where did Jesus tell me to keep the Sabbath? I follow Jesus Christ, not Moses. We are in a new covenant, not stuck in the old. Jesus says when you're stuck in the old and you go back to the written code, you're cursed from God.
Gotcha. And then Hayden Walton, witness is at his last line of defense now. You can't grant anything. That was a comment. And he also says, witness, your conclusion is always in your premises. So I think that was a correction on something he said earlier. And then Benjamin Horowitz says, smuggling in these conclusions is precisely what jail is talking about. So another comment. Thank you so much for the super chats.
Yep.
And then that's a $2 one, so I'll put it on the screen. Thank you so much for all the support, everybody. And y'all have 22 minutes left. So feel free to take this wherever you'd like to go. You can be a little bit more lax with the topic if you need to be. Eon, you are the affirmative. Do you have anything else you'd like to do to build your case here? Or the witness?
hear me
Do
now?
you
asked
have
my
anything else you'd
questions
like to cover to build your case? Do you
Yeah,
have 22
I'm saying
minutes
that.
still?
Yeah. I'm gonna do that. I've been writing my closing statement, but yeah, let me scroll in my notes here because I think what we've been seeing here is every point we're making is just we're just clashing, right? Because it's like so. Maybe we could get into why this is happening because I feel like we're on the same sort of level. This is the way I think, JL. I think we're on the same level. It's just that the evidence led me to the Christian God, where the same evidence has led you to naturalism. And so, but I think the Christian God better explains and is more plausible than your worldview. And I think maybe we should hit on that because I think the Christian God is more plausible.
Cool.
Right.
Give me the mechanistic relationship between it and the thing.
Can you explain that in a different phrasing?
Yes, please.
What do you mean by mechanism?
Please break down the mechanistic relationship between the God set and the not God set.
What's a mechanistic relationship?
I've explained this to you 3 times so far tonight. Do I need to explain it again?
You mean like electrons and neurons?
How did the God do it?
Oh, how did God create all things? Is that what you're asking?
Yes, the mechanistic relationship. Please describe it.
So how God created all things? Well, he says in his own word that he spoke it into existence.
That's a claim. That doesn't say how his words did that.
Right.
That's an assertion.
Right.
That's not an explanation.
Right. How did the universe exist forever in your worldview?
You realize that's a misformed question, right? We
Correct.
ask it.
So it's not arbitrary and it's not external, right?
That doesn't even apply to this.
It doesn't apply to.
You're just using terms. You're just throwing terms out there.
Do you
like
remember
they mean something?
Hold on. You asked me, is it good because, and I wrote this in my notes, is it good because God commands it, or does God command it because it's good?
Yes.
Yes, and that's a false dilemma.
It's not a false dilemma.
Because God is good. Do you not see? It's a false dilemma.
And I told you, that's not a false dilemma because that is an uninformative tautology. You're using an uninformative tautology to dodge the dilemma.
Okay. So
but here's the kicker. No, but here's the kicker. I'll even go one step further. By you saying that God is good, you're saying that God has no choice but to do other than its nature, which means, you know, it is because you're saying God is good, so it can't do anything but good things.
No, God is the one who defines good by his own nature.
Okay, so what is it that ontologically grounds God's nature?
His actions.
That's not how you get ontological grounding.
Really?
What is it that undergirds? What is the underlying substrate that grounds God's nature as being good?
His actions.
That's not how you ground that. Good. Because number one, there's nothing in your own worldview, by your own lights, nothing exists external of your God that dictates what it must or must not do or what ought or ought not be done. So because nothing like that exists, you saying that God is good doesn't actually say anything, because when God is the only thing that exists, how can God be like coherently good when there is no not good to reference for coherency? How does that make sense?
There is, because again,
no, if God hasn't created a not God set prior to creation in your worldview, how do you define what good is?
Well, again, because God reveals himself over time.
I said prior to creation.
Did we exist prior to creation?
It doesn't matter. We can still logically infer these things from the statements you make now. How is God coherently good? It's the only thing.
Argument.
How is God coherently good? How is God coherently good if God is the only thing that exists?
You just answered your own question.
No, I didn't, because I need to know what is not good to understand what good is.
Not good, then, would be, obviously, something that's not God.
Okay, so if there's nothing, if nothing exists, but God, how do we know what God is?
Well, that's the thing. We didn't exist at that time, so we don't.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. How do we know what God is if nothing exists but God?
Because that's a good question. That's why God revealed himself to us.
God, then that's just God making a claim, but there's no justification for God to claim that itself is good because there's no objective standard for what good is or what good ought be.
He is the objective standard.
No, it's not. You're just labeling it that.
No, you're just
the lights of your own worldview defeat your position because God cannot state coherently that it itself is good. God can't state that it itself is good because there's nothing to reference what is not good to understand what good is.
Yes, there is. Because
no, there isn't.
Yes, there is.
What existed? What existed other than God prior to creation?
Nothing has to exist prior to God.
There you go. So there's nothing to reference for mental content or coherency.
No, what matters is what existed after God.
No, it doesn't. Because you say your God is eternal. Your God is God is existed forever.
Yeah.
But creation in your worldview has not. So if God is existed forever, then its attributes are eternal as well. Which means if God is at one point the only thing that exists, then how can you say that it is good when there is nothing to reference what is not good to tell you what good is?
Yeah, maybe I can paint this for you. So we have an eternal God, existed before creation, who is good. Okay?
How do you know that? How do you know that?
Because God deems it so.
How do you know that? Okay. How do you know that? So you're just taking it that God is good because God is good. It's an uninformative tautology.
No, that's just reality.
Oh, what the living. Okay.
And so if God, because I'm a software engineer, if I create something
disanalogous, the parameters that exist for your field don't exist for the God.
Okay, what's an analogy? Give me a definition.
An analogy is when you take two different things. You take one thing, like when I analogized the observability of the universe with the brick wall you can't see past. That's analogous because we can't observe past a certain point, the Planck time, just like we can't observe beyond an infinite brick wall. That's analogous. Your analogy is disanalogous, but you're applying a false analogy because the parameters that exist in your analogy don't exist to your God.
How do you know?
The limiting parameters of the analogy. Like, for example, when you said when your child burns its hand and you're its parent, there's a problem there. The human distinction. Humans are not equivalent to God. The parameters that exist for humans don't exist for God by definition. That's an analytical truth. So therefore, if you analogize a scenario in which there are parameters that dictate or govern behaviors that don't apply to the God, it's not analogous. You can't appeal to human experience to analogize the God because then you literally bring the God down to equivalent that, to make that an equivalent. But you can't do that because God is above that. Those parameters don't apply.
Analogies are not supposed to be 100%.
Yes, they are. That's why they're analogies.
No, the analogy is again showing something that follows the same line of logic. It's
but if your underlying principles are fundamentally different, like the parameters that exist for humans that don't exist for God, then the conclusions that you come to are going to be limited by those parameters. Those don't exist for the God. Therefore, it's a disanalogous. It's disanalogous. It's a false analogy.
That's not true at all.
Because if it was equivalent, it would be the father would make it logically impossible for the child to ever burn their hand. That's what a God can do.
Well, no,
but a human can't do that.
Hold on. The analogy is analogous. The Father and Son with God in people is because God reveals himself as a father figure. It's right.
I don't care what dictates a God. What dictates to God? What parameters? No. What parameters exist for God that dictates it must do it that way?
What?
Nothing. But in the human analogy, there are parameters that exist that dictate what's going on in that scenario that can't be broken by the people in it.
I see what's going on. You're attacking the illustration. You're not attacking the inference. I'm saying that the underlying parameters don't exist in both. The underlying parameter of my brick wall analogy. No, they do. The underlying analogy, the analogous structure of my brick wall analogy is unobservability. Sounds like you're playing word police because you're.
I'm not playing word
evidence.
police. I'm not. You just don't have the vocabulary.
Not the point of the analogy. The point of the analogy is not proving being outside time and space.
No,
The
I'm
point
explaining
of the
how it's just
analogy-
analogous.
Hold on. The analogy is showing how you can be outside of a system and create a system, right? And so that's what's.
Wait, did the same laws apply to the system that apply to the software engineer?
If I create them that way.
No. Do the same laws of reality that you persist in exist? Do the laws of physics and do the laws of physics apply to the system that you created as they also apply to you? Like,
No.
for example, World of Warcraft. Could World of Warcraft break the laws of reality? No, it can't. No, the game cannot. The physical game cannot. Okay, you're creating a physical game.
We're not talking about a
Okay,
we're talking
but here's
about
the problem.
software.
The laws that apply to the software engineer also apply to the thing that the software engineer is creating. The laws that apply to humans do not apply to your God by definition. So therefore, it's not analogous.
Just like a creature I create inside my software that I can make fly with his arms.
No. When you create a game, are there not laws that govern how you create that game? Like how you physically create the game? There are. There are laws that govern how you physically put the game together.
I'm not physically putting the game together.
You are. When you're writing the software, there are physical laws that govern that. That govern how you do it. You can't break those laws.
Create the laws.
No. You create the laws in the game, but the physical game itself.
Just like God creates the laws of our universe.
No, that's not the way it works, because those laws don't apply equally to the God. Those laws don't apply to the God itself. So nothing dictates. So nothing dictates to the God that it must do it any particular way.
So again, when we're talking about morality and why we know something's good, okay?
No, it's subjectively good. It's subjectively good to you.
No, it's subjectively
just like it's subjective to your God.
No, it's not. No,
it is subjective to your God. It pertains to moral realism. That doesn't apply to me. You ask me, how do you determine a thing is wrong? Well, it's my I subjectively internalize it to be wrong. It's wrong for me, but I don't make the claim that it is objectively wrong. If you ask me, how do you determine a thing is objectively wrong? I don't. But you're not proving anything because I'm a moral anti-realist.
Anything is wrong.
No, I can say why it is wrong in a subjective sense.
Right,
I have stances. But I can also reference other people's stances as well. But that's all I have to reference.
Right.
I still have ontological parsimony, and I'm still not begging the question.
Well, you actually are.
No, what conclusion am I assuming the truth of?
That God doesn't exist.
No, I'm not. I know it doesn't exist for a fact.
Yeah.
And had you been paying attention, you would have heard me.
You heard it all here. He just begged the question. He just admitted it.
What?
You said God not existing is
I know it doesn't exist for a fact. And if you had listened, if you had been paying attention, like you haven't been, I actually explained in this debate how it is impossible for it to exist. But you weren't paying attention.
Did not succeed.
But don't worry. I'm going to cover that in my outro.
Okay. And so, again, so you don't know what analogy is.
I do, which I explained.
You don't know what begging the question. Again,
it's like assuming the truth of the conclusion in your premises.
It seems like you live in a subjective world where if you just make it up and it seems right to you, you think it's true.
That's not what truth is. That's not what truth is. It's not my philosophy of truth either.
You can't tell me if it's right or wrong because everything you believe in is subjective.
No, I'm at this point.
And so, again, my position gives all the answers that your position cannot give.
It does.
And it's more plausible. And
it's not.
The Christian God must exist because
the EPOE actually reduces the plausibility of his God. But I mean, I already proved his God doesn't exist anyway, so it doesn't matter.
Again, if someone is a science believer and you believe in science, okay, you have to believe that the Christian God exists because
it's a non sequitur.
For any of these three things that I mentioned, I have more points too, but it'll take a long time. And so these three things, though, is pretty concrete. We have the contingency of the universe in all things, the contingency of the universe. We have the evidence that's more evidence than Julius Caesar crossing the Rubicon for the resurrection of Jesus Christ, which proves, again, because who raised Jesus? the Christian God. And then we have morality itself. So with those three things, it all points to the living, breathing Christian God.
Wait, are you saying like just the existence of our ability to make moral statements?
No, I'm talking about
that's what morality is. Morality is just our no. Morality is just our ability to make moral statements. That's all morality is. Morality doesn't dictate what is and is not moral and immoral. That's just like basic. That's just a basic philosophical terminology. Like morality is just the capacity to make moral statements.
I get the only reason why you can say something's immoral is because you're stealing from the Christian worldview.
No,
I know you don't believe in logic.
No, so I mean morality. No, it's not. What do you mean I don't believe in morality? I have a sense of morality. Humans have senses of morality.
Logic.
What?
You don't believe in logic?
I do believe in logic. I do. Logic. No, it's not subjective because logic and morality are two different things. So morality isn't a language. Logic is a language. Different rules apply.
So morality is not a language, you're claiming?
No, morality is not a language.
I think it is. It's a language that tells us what's wrong and what's right.
What's the syntax of morality? Okay, I mean, Taco, I got nothing else for him unless there's a super chat or something. I mean,
logic's a...
okay, good.
Let me know when y'all are ready, and we'll go ahead and move into the closing statements.
Oh, we're ready.
Yeah, I'm set.
I'm ready.
I do need to put up a vote. No, we hit the goal, people. We hit the goal. Teamwork makes the dream work. Thank you so much for all the support, people. I am... All right, put up the vote for tonight's Master Debater, so make sure to get your votes in on that. If you've enjoyed the conversation so far, slam that like button. And you've got... Are you ready? Ian? Or Witness? Cool. You've got 8 minutes for your closing.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so... Firstly, I would like to thank JL, and it's been a pleasure, right? And Taco, thank you for this opportunity. And JL, man, he was a battle. I'll tell you that. It was really fun. And so, but the question before us was, does the Christian God exist? I said yes, and I gave 3 facts that demand only one explanation. And those facts were contingency, the universe began. And this is according to the BVG theorem, entropy, and just modern science. And JL said, no, the universe is actually eternal, which goes against science, right? And then he also said it's a brute fact. Brute fact, that's not an answer. And so I would say a necessary personal mind is required for contingency, which goes along with scientific data. And then the second point was the resurrection account of Jesus Christ, the historical account of the resurrection, which he was crucified. There was an empty tomb. There was 500 witnesses, and there were transformed cowards, right? People who didn't want to go up against the Roman guard, people who didn't want to they didn't want to die and stuff like this. That's why they're hiding. They're hiding from the Roman guard. They didn't want to die because they saw the person they were following get crucified. And JL said that, well, they just stole they stole the body out of the tomb. And so somehow a few disciples got past the Roman guard, the sealed stone, which was like 2 tons, and they had no motive to do so. Like no motive. They didn't even believe Jesus in that time. They had no motive. And then he said, well, if God did bodily resurrect Jesus Christ out of the tomb, it's magic, right? But it's actually a miracle by the author of law, right? So if God created all things, including the laws of logic, the laws of everything, well, he can pause that. And this is what we call a miracle. A miracle is something that happens against all laws, right? Against what we expect to happen. And only God raises the dead, right? And then the third point was morality. We all know evil is real and duty binds us. JL said, well, it's just brain chemistry and my own subjective thoughts. And so he can't really ground an ought to anything. And then he lifted up the Euthyphro dilemma, which God is good. He gave a false dilemma, right? And so a false dilemma in the third horn, actually, the correct is good is God's nature, and that's something that that dilemma, that false dilemma, doesn't attribute. And so only a lawgiver commands conscience. Okay, JL gave denials, labels, and he dodged the entire time, while I gave evidenced, published, historical, and lived. Okay. All these evidences, and I gave 3 pillars with 1 foundation. The God who made the world, entered it, and raised Jesus from the dead exists, which is the Christian God. And so that's 3 for 3 for Christianity and 0 for 3 for naturalism. And so the Christian God is real. He does exist. My opponent failed miserably to show a more plausible worldview that accounts for all these things. All he gave, again, he just denies the science. He just denies reality for his position. And at that, I will leave my time. Thank you.
Thank you for the wonderful closing. JL, let me know when you're ready, and I'll start your 8 minutes.
I'm ready.
You got 8 minutes.
All right. As we can all see, my opponent has no rational justification for claiming a God exists. He relied on nothing but logical fallacies, including begging the question, appeals to emotion, appeals to mystery and magic, and arguments from personal incredulity to support his position. He conceded to my ontological parsimony, and he conceded to moral relativism per the Euthyphro dilemma. And most importantly, my opponent refused to address either of the contradictions that I pointed out in my intro. My opponent did not reject the mainstream Christian definition that I presented in my intro. Thus, my definition of God that Christianity and thus by the definition of God that Christianity and my opponent holds to, the God does not exist. So he affirmed my intro. Thus, he kind of handed it to me by never addressing that. And no amount of preaching to me or anybody else as though the Bible means anything is going to provide him any kind of rational justification. It's only going to support the conclusion that belief in a God requires fallacious reasoning, which would be directly contradictory to the concept of a God that wants humans to know that it exists. So thank you, Taco, and to this guy, and most importantly, to the live chat. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much for the great conclusions, y'all. So, what we have here is 28 votes. So, who is tonight's master debater is the question. Well, with 38 votes, or 74% of 38 votes, it's J.L. Warren. Witness got 26% of the vote. J.L. Warren, you are tonight's master debater.